shut it off and put a lock on it. He doesn't get a drop until he signs.
That's what the HOA president ordered her crew to do to the water valve feeding my house, in a 108-degree Arizona heat wave. I came home to dry faucets, a wife drenched in sweat, and a 14-year-old daughter filling cups from bottled water. She'd padlocked the shut-off valve on my own water line. My property isn't even in the HOA. Never was. I own the ranch. I own the well. The entire subdivision drinks from it. She didn't know the man she just cut off spent 20 years designing water systems for Phoenix. She didn't know about Clause 14 in the supply agreement, the one that gives me the legal right to shut off water to all 200 of her houses. So I grabbed my bolt cutters, restored my water, and started building the case that would drain her world dry. Would you have turned the valve or turned the tables? You know the sound a faucet makes when there's no water? It's not silence. It's a gasp. A hollow, rattling wheeze, like the pipes themselves are choking. That's what I heard at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday in July. Kitchen sink, handle all the way up. 105 degrees already pressing against the windows like a hand on your chest. My daughter Tess was still asleep down the hall. Laureen was in the bathroom getting ready for summer school prep. And our faucet was dying right in front of me. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, felt longer, because in those 10 seconds, I understood exactly what had happened. The HOA president, a woman named Brenda Lockhart, had cut my water. My property wasn't even in her HOA. She didn't know who I was, didn't know I'd spent 22 years as a water systems engineer for the city of Phoenix, didn't know I owned the only deep well feeding her 200-home subdivision. She cut my water, so I cut theirs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If this story shocks you, hit subscribe right now, because what this woman did next will make your jaw hit the floor. Let me take you back to the beginning. My family's land sits about 45 minutes southeast of Phoenix, out in Pinal County. Flat desert stretching in every direction. Saguaros standing like sentries. The kind of place where heat doesn't just surround you, it lives inside you. My grandfather, Henry Ellison, bought 45 acres out there in 1961. First black landowner in the area. People told him the land was worthless, too dry, too remote, too hostile. Henry didn't listen to people much. He hired a drilling crew, and they punched down 600 feet through caliche and sandstone until they hit an aquifer so clean you could drink it straight from the ground. That well changed everything. It turned dead land into living land. Horses, cattle, a garden that had no business growing in that soil. A proper ranch house with a wraparound porch where 4 generations of Ellisons would sit and watch the sun drop behind the superstitions. My grandmother planted desert willows along the fence line that still bloom every spring. Pale pink flowers that smell like vanilla when the evening breeze hits them right. She planted them the year after the well came in because she said the land deserved something beautiful after giving them something useful. The Ellison well became a landmark. Not officially, you wouldn't find it on any map. But people knew. During the drought of 2011, when half the private wells in Pinal County ran dry and the municipal supply was rationed, neighbors drove from miles around with jugs and barrels and whatever they could carry. Henry was 86 years old that summer, and he sat on the porch in a folding chair with a garden hose running into a spigot he'd rigged at the road. Never charged a dime, never turned a single person away. Water's not something you own, he used to say. It's something you steward. I was 30 then, working my way up at Phoenix Water, and I drove out every weekend to help him manage the line of cars. Some of those people are still in the area. They remember. When Henry passed, the ranch went to my father. When my father passed, it came to me. By 2018, the family had more land than we could work. A developer called Pinnacle came knocking, wanted to build a master plan subdivision, Copper Ridge Estates, 200 homes, parks, the whole deal. We sold them 40 acres, kept 5, the original ranch house, the barn, the corral, and most importantly, the well. Our attorney drew up a water supply agreement, simple terms. The subdivision buys water from the Ellison well. In exchange, our family gets free water for our property, plus monthly distribution payments. Clause 14 was the one that mattered. If the HOA or any community entity interferes with the owner's water access or property rights, the owner can suspend all water distribution with 30 days written notice. Our lawyer called it the nuclear clause. I called it common sense. You don't bite the hand that fills your glass. I retired early from the Phoenix Water Department at 43. 22 years designing, maintaining, and troubleshooting municipal water systems. I knew every valve, every pressure regulator, every backflow preventer between Scottsdale and Casa Grande. Lorene kept teaching, 8th grade science at the middle school in town. Tess was finishing 8th grade herself, already smarter than both of us. Life was quiet. The well hummed. The checks came in. The horses grazed. Then one afternoon in late May, a white Lincoln Navigator rolled up my dirt driveway, trailing a cloud of caliche dust. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Brenda Lockhart. Platinum blonde hair shellacked against the heat, clipboard in one hand, sunglasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked at my barn like it had personally offended her. I was on the porch replacing a screen. The smell of creosote hung in the still air, sweet and sharp. The way the desert smells right before monsoon season teases you with rain that never comes. Mr. Ellison? She didn't wait for an answer. I'm Brenda Lockhart, president of Copper Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. She looked past me at the house, the corral, the horses flicking flies in the shade. That ranch is an eyesore. When are you planning to sell? I set down my screwdriver. I'm not. She smiled. Not warm, calculated. Everyone has a price, Mr. Ellison. My grandfather didn't. My father didn't. You're welcome to keep looking, though. She drove off. The tick of her cooling engine lingered after the dust settled. That evening, Earl Compton walked over from the next property. Earl was in his 70s, a retired rancher who'd known my grandfather, skin like old leather, hands that could still rope a calf. He leaned against my fence and spoke low, like the mesquite trees might be listening. Watch the Lockharts, Wade. Craig's been talking to people. Wants your land and that well something fierce. He's got plans for 30 more houses north of the ridge. Let him plan. I'm serious. They pushed out the Delgados last year. Code violations that appeared out of nowhere. The Delgados fought for 6 months and then just left. I thanked Earl, went inside, didn't think much more about it. That was my first mistake. The letters started arriving in June. Official HOA stationery. Copper Ridge Estates letterhead with a little copper-colored logo. The first one cited me for an unapproved structure, my barn, built in 1974. The second cited unauthorized livestock. I had 2 horses on 5 acres zoned agricultural. The third demanded I submit architectural plans for exterior modifications. I'd painted my porch railing. I drove to the Pinal County Recorder's office on a Wednesday morning, pulled the subdivision plat for Copper Ridge Estates, ran my finger along every boundary line. My 5 acres sat entirely outside the recorded plat, not adjacent to it, not overlapping, outside. Under Arizona Revised Statute Section 33-1802, an HOA only has jurisdiction over properties included in its recorded declaration and plat map. My ranch was never part of Copper Ridge. Brenda had exactly 0 authority to send me a parking ticket, let alone a violation notice. I wrote back, politely, included a copy of the plat map with my parcel highlighted, cited the statute, sent it certified mail so there'd be a record. I even highlighted the relevant boundary lines in yellow, just to be helpful. Thought that would end it. Thought a reasonable person would see the map, read the law, and move on. But Brenda Lockhart wasn't a reasonable person. She was a woman on a mission, and the law was just a speed bump she hadn't figured out how to drive around yet. My response letter came back to me 3 days later, literally. She'd written, "Rejected, non-compliant," across the envelope in red marker and put it back in my mailbox. I stood at my mailbox in the 100-degree sun, holding that envelope and almost laughed. Almost. Then I added it to the folder. The fines started arriving. $50 a day for the unapproved structure. $25 a day for the unauthorized livestock. They claimed I owed $1,800 by the end of the first month. I could have ignored them. My attorney said they were unenforceable against a non-member property. But I didn't ignore them. I filed each one, dated and noted, because I was building something. I just didn't know yet how big it would need to be. 2 weeks later, Craig Lockhart showed up at my well house. I found him at 7 in the morning, standing inside the chain link enclosure, taking photographs of the pump, the pressure tank, the distribution manifold. He had a tape measure out. The buzz of cicadas and the mesquite was the only sound until I spoke. "This is private property, Craig." He turned. Big man, ruddy face, work boots that had never seen real work. "This well services the whole community. We have a right to inspect it." "No, you don't." I pointed at the gate he'd come through. "That lock you broke? That's criminal trespass. The well is on my land, deeded to my family. The water supply agreement gives you water, not access." He held up his hands, smiled that same smile his wife had. "Just being neighborly, Wade." He left. I replaced the lock with a heavier one. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and read the water supply agreement word by word, every clause, every subclause. The metallic tang of iron-rich well water sat in a glass beside me. Our water had a taste, faint and mineral, and I'd loved it since I was a boy. I opened a new folder on my desk and wrote on the tab with a black marker, Lockhart. 4 weeks later, the desert tried to kill us all. July 9th, 108 degrees by noon. The kind of heat that makes asphalt soft under your shoes and turns a metal mailbox into a branding iron. I came home from the feed store around 2 in the afternoon, walked inside. Lorene was in the kitchen with a towel around her neck. Tess was filling cups from a case of bottled water on the counter. "Faucets went dry about an hour ago," Lorene said. Her voice was calm. Lorene's voice was always calm. That's how you knew she was furious. I went outside. Checked the well first. Running fine. Pressure normal. Flow rate exactly where it should be. I walked the distribution line from the well house toward our property connection, about 300 yards through scrub and gravel. And there it was, the shutoff valve that sat on the HOA common ground easement between the main distribution line and our house. Someone had closed it and padlocked it. A brand new master lock, brassy and bright in the sun. I stood there in 108 degrees, with sweat running down my back, and the sun cooking the top of my head, and my family inside a house with no water. My shirt was soaked through in under a minute. The ground radiated heat upward like a griddle. I could feel it through the soles of my boots. I touched the padlock, still warm from whoever had snapped it shut. Couldn't have been more than a few hours old. Something shifted behind my ribs. Not anger, something quieter than anger, something more patient, something that had been building since the first violation letter and was now settling into my bones like concrete setting in a form. I took a photograph, then another, then a close-up of the tool marks on the valve handle where someone had used a wrench to crank it fully closed. Back inside, Lorene had wet a towel with bottled water and was holding it against Tess's neck. The house was already heating up without the evaporative cooler running. No water, no cooling. In an hour it would be 90 degrees inside. In 2 hours, dangerous. I thought about my father, who'd grown up in this house without air conditioning and survived every summer because Henry's well never failed. Not once in 60 years. And now some woman with a clipboard and a grudge had shut it down with a $15 padlock. I called Brenda. "You cut my water." "You're in violation of community water usage standards, Mr. Ellison. My property isn't in your community. I own the well." "The board disagrees. We've determined that your usage is excessive and—" "Brenda, you padlocked the valve on my water line in 108-degree heat. My wife and 14-year-old daughter are inside with no water." "Then perhaps you should have attended the board meeting." I hung up, went to the garage, grabbed the 36-inch bolt cutters. The crack of hardened steel jaws biting through that master lock shackle was one of the most satisfying sounds I've ever heard. The valve spun open. Water hissed back into the line. A rushing, gurgling, beautiful sound, like the pipes were taking a breath after being held underwater. Back inside, Tess turned the kitchen faucet. Water arced into the sink. She looked at me and exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. Maybe she had. I photographed the cut padlock, the valve, the tool marks on the handle. Drove to the Pinal County Sheriff's substation and filed a report. Under Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 13-3407, tampering with a water supply is a Class 6 felony. Cutting water to an occupied residence during extreme heat could also constitute endangerment under ARS 13-1201, a Class 6 felony if done recklessly. Deputy Nolan Griffith took my statement. Young guy, earnest, took notes carefully.
I believe you, Mr. Ellison, but proving who turned that valve, without a witness or camera footage, that's going to be hard.
I nodded. I understood the system. A report without proof is a piece of paper in a filing cabinet. But a report with a timestamp and a badge number is the first brick in a wall. And I was going to build a wall so high the Lockharts would need a ladder just to see over it. Back home, I installed a trail camera pointed at the valve. Basic model, motion activated, infrared for night vision. $47 at the hardware store. If anyone touched that valve again, I'd have their face in high definition. Lorene asked me that night if I was worried. I told her no. She gave me that look she gives her 8th graders when they turn in homework with the answers copied from the back of the book. Wade, are you worried? I kissed her forehead. I'm prepared.
There's a difference.
The folder on my desk was getting thicker. 2 weeks after the water cut off, Brenda found a new weapon. I came home to find a notice taped to my well house gate. Pinal County Environmental Health Department. Someone had filed a complaint alleging my well was contaminated. Source of complaint, anonymous. But the timing told me everything. The county sent a technician, nice woman, very thorough. Pulled samples from the wellhead, the distribution point, and my kitchen tap. Results came back in 5 days. Coliform, absent. Nitrates, well below EPA maximum. Arsenic, non-detect. pH, 7.4, right in the sweet spot. My well didn't just pass. It exceeded EPA drinking water standards across every metric. 22 years of engineering experience meant I maintained that well like it was a surgical instrument.
But Brenda didn't wait for the results.
The same day she filed the complaint, she sent a mass email to every homeowner in Copper Ridge. Subject line in all capitals. Urgent. Community water supply may be contaminated. Purchase bottled water immediately. 200 families. Parents with young children. Elderly residents on fixed incomes. People panicked. 3 families went out and bought whole house filtration systems, $500 each, based on nothing but Brenda Lockhart's email. I ran into Brenda at the mailbox cluster 3 days later. She was pulling envelopes from the HOA box. She looked at me, and what she said next, she said slowly and deliberately. Maybe if your family had maintained that well properly, people wouldn't be afraid. But I suppose maintenance isn't really your strong suit, is it? She held my gaze. The subtext sat between us like a third person. I knew what she meant. She knew I knew. I said nothing. Walked back to my truck. The chalky dust of the parking area hung in the air. The sun hit her white Navigator so hard it hurt to look at. And somewhere in that subdivision, people were pouring out perfectly clean water because this woman told them to be afraid. I went home and sat on the porch for a long time. The heat was still brutal, but a faint breeze came up from the south, carrying the smell of dust and ironwood. I could hear the well pump cycling through the ground beneath me, a low, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. My well, my grandfather's well, feeding 200 homes full of people who were now pouring perfectly clean water down their drains because of one woman's email. I thought about calling a lawyer right then, but something told me to wait, to keep documenting, to let the Lockharts keep showing me who they were. My father used to say, when someone's digging their own grave, don't take the shovel. The contamination scare wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. Earl came over that evening, walking slow, looking troubled. He'd heard from a friend on the county board of supervisors. Craig Lockhart had been meeting with the county commissioner, pushing for an emergency water district designation. The idea was simple: declare the Ellison well a critical community resource, invoke eminent domain provisions, and seize it. Government-sanctioned theft wrapped in public safety language. Then Tess came home from summer basketball camp. She dropped her bag by the door and sat on the couch without saying anything. Lorene and I exchanged a look.
What happened?
A girl in my group said our water is poison. She said her mom told her our family is making people sick. 14 years old. Sitting on her own couch in her own house, being told her family's legacy was toxic. Lorene sat beside her. I stood in the doorway. The taste of clean water, our water, Henry's water, sat in my mouth like an accusation that didn't belong to me. I didn't sleep well that night. Lay in bed listening to the ceiling fan and the distant yip of coyotes and the sound of Laureen breathing beside me. 14 years of raising that girl, teaching her to ride horses, helping her with science projects, watching her grow into someone who tested water pH for fun and wanted to understand how aquifers worked. And some stranger's mother told her our family was poison. There's a line, and they'd crossed it, not just into my property, not just into my water supply, but into my daughter's sense of safety in her own school. That was the moment I stopped playing defense. That night, after Tess went to bed, I called Nash Webb, old colleague from the Arizona Department of Water Resources. Nash owed me a favor from 2016 when I'd helped him troubleshoot a distribution failure in Maricopa. I asked him to pull some records. He said he'd have them by Friday. What Nash sent me changed everything. I spread the documents across my kitchen table on a Saturday morning. The printer had been running for 20 minutes, and the room smelled like warm toner. Laureen brought coffee and sat across from me. The water supply agreement, the original, recorded with the county, was exactly as I remembered it. Clause 14, highlighted now in bright yellow. In the event that the association or any community entity interferes with, restricts, or impairs the owner's water access, property rights, or quiet enjoyment, the owner may suspend all water distribution services upon 30 days written notice. The nuclear option. Right there in black and white. But that wasn't what made my hands go still on the table. Nash had dug deeper. Pinnacle Development, the company that built Copper Ridge, went bankrupt in 2021. Their assets went to auction. And the entity that purchased the development rights and the HOA management contract was a company called Ridgeline Holdings LLC, registered in Arizona, single member, Craig Lockhart. Craig didn't just serve on the HOA board, he owned the HOA. Through a shell company, he controlled the management contract, the operating budget, and every decision Brenda made as president. Brenda wasn't freelancing, she was an employee. And it got worse. I pulled 3 years of HOA financial statements, public records, available to any homeowner who asked, though apparently nobody had. HOA dues had increased 22% over 3 years. Roughly $47,000 had been paid to Ridgeline Holdings for infrastructure maintenance assessments. I drove through Copper Ridge that afternoon. The playground equipment was rusted. The community pool pump was failing. The landscaping was dying. $47,000 in maintenance, and nothing had been maintained. The eminent domain push wasn't about community water safety. It was Craig Lockhart trying to seize my family's well so he could service his own second development north of the ridge. More houses, more profit, all on the back of Henry Ellison's water. This wasn't a mean HOA president with a power complex. This was a coordinated land grab targeting a black family's generational property. The violation letters, the trespassing, the water cutoff, the contamination scare, the eminent domain play. Every move was designed to pressure us into selling. And every move had Craig Lockhart's fingerprints on it, hidden behind his wife's clipboard and his shell company's paperwork. I sat at that kitchen table with documents spread from one end to the other, and I felt the weight of what I was holding. Not just evidence, history. My grandfather bought this land when the deed office tried to redirect him to a different county. My father held it through 2 recessions and a drought that killed every ranch within 50 miles. And now, Craig Lockhart thought he could take it with an LLC and a county commissioner's phone number. They picked the wrong family. Monday morning I called Jill Weaver, water rights attorney out of Tucson, sharp as a desert thorn and twice as patient. I'd met her at a water conference in 2019 and kept her card. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. "You want to invoke Clause 14. "I want to invoke Clause 14. You understand what that means. 200 homes without water in July. I understand what it means. I also understand what they did to my family." Jill laid out the strategy like a surgeon planning an operation. Step 1, compile the evidence package, padlock photographs, police report, dismissed contamination complaint, Brenda's mass panic email, Craig's shell company documentation, inflated dues, fake maintenance invoices. Step 2. File a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Water Resources regarding the attempted well seizure through fraudulent emergency water district proceedings. Step 3. Invoke Clause 14. Send formal 30-day notice to the HOA via certified mail with return receipt. I spent 3 days building that evidence package. Lorene helped. Tess helped too. She organized the photographs by date and location, labeled each one with a post-it note in her neat handwriting. My daughter, the scientist, treating evidence like lab data. I was proud of her, and furious that she had to do it at all. We organized everything chronologically, cross-referenced every document, the violation letters, the returned envelope with Brenda's red marker, the padlock photographs, the police report, the water test results, the panic email, the trail camera footage, Craig's shell company records, the inflated dues, the fake invoices. Each item went into a clear plastic sleeve, numbered and tabbed. Jill had said, "A judge should be able to understand your case in 5 minutes from the binder alone." I made it so a judge could understand it in 3. 4 copies, one for Jill, one for the county, one for ADWR, and one for my desk. Then I did what I do best, engineering. I installed a digital monitoring system on the well, remote-controlled master valve with encrypted access, flow sensors on every distribution branch, 4 weatherproof cameras covering the well house, the access road, and both sides of the easement. I could monitor pressure, flow rate, and valve status from my phone. I could open or close the master distribution valve from my kitchen table. 22 years of water systems work, and I'd never built a more elegant setup. Here's something most people don't know. Under Arizona Revised Statutes Section 45-454, groundwater rights in Arizona are tied to the overlying land, not to any community or political subdivision. No HOA, no developer, no county commissioner can seize a private well without a court order based on demonstrated public necessity, and personal profit doesn't qualify. Craig's emergency water district plan required a public vote of affected residents, a vote he was trying to skip entirely. I contacted the 3 families who'd bought filtration systems, showed them the county test results. Clean water, perfect water, $500 each, wasted because of one email. Their anger was quiet and deep, the kind that shows up at meetings. Earl rallied 6 old-timers who'd been in the area for decades, men and women who remembered the Ellison well, saving the community during the 2011 drought, who remembered Henry. "Your grandfather gave water to anyone who needed it," Earl said. "These people need to remember that." The night before I mailed the notice, Lorene sat on the edge of our bed. The overhead fan turned slowly. Outside, a coyote called across the flat, dark desert. "Is shutting off water to 200 families the right thing to do?" she asked. I sat beside her. "I'm not shutting it off. I'm showing them who's been controlling it, and it's not me. And if they blame you anyway, then I'll be the villain for 30 days. But the truth has a way of catching up." The certified letter went out the next morning. I drove to the post office myself, stood in line behind a woman mailing birthday presents to her grandchildren, handed the envelope to the clerk, watched her stamp it, scan it, drop it in the outgoing bin. Return receipt requested, tracking number recorded. The 30-day clock started ticking. I walked out into the parking lot, and the heat wrapped around me like a blanket someone had left in a dryer too long. I sat in my truck for a minute, with the engine off, windows down, letting the heat be what it was. Then I drove home. Brenda got the letter on a Thursday. By Friday, she was going door to door. I know because Earl called me every 2 hours with updates. Her pitch was simple and desperate. Wade Ellison is holding this community hostage. He's threatening to shut off our water in the middle of summer. We need to stand together against this bully. Craig moved faster. He had his attorney file an emergency injunction in Pinal County Superior Court by Monday. Hearing was Wednesday. I sat in the back of the courtroom with Jill Weaver. Craig's lawyer argued imminent public harm, 200 families at risk of losing water during extreme heat. The judge listened. Then Jill stood up and presented the water supply agreement. Read Clause 14 aloud. presented the padlock evidence, the police report, the false contamination complaint. The judge denied the injunction. "The contract is clear," she said. "Mr. Ellison followed the prescribed notice procedure after documented interference with his property rights. The court will not override a valid contractual provision." Craig's face went the color of old brick. Brenda, sitting behind him, gripped her clipboard so hard the metal clip bent. They retaliated that night. I found the ranch fence cut in 3 places the next morning. Clean cuts. Bolt cutters, same as I'd used on their padlock. My 2 horses, Duke and Penny, were loose. Penny had made it to the county road. If Lorene had come home 20 minutes earlier in the dark, she'd have hit a 1,000-pound horse at 50 miles an hour. The thought made my stomach drop like a stone in a dry well. I spent 3 hours that afternoon repairing fence in 110-degree heat. The wire was hot enough to burn bare skin. I wore leather gloves that were soaked through with sweat by the time I finished the first section. Duke and Penny stood nearby watching me work, probably wondering why I kept muttering under my breath. Lorene brought me water twice, real water, from our well, cold from the tap and tasting like home. I installed trail cameras along the fence line, 4 of them, hidden in the thick mesquite branches where the thorns would discourage anyone from reaching in. Motion activated, infrared for night vision. I positioned each one with the same care I used to position flow sensors on a municipal water main. Angles calculated, coverage overlapping, no dead zones. 3 nights later, at 2:14 a.m., the cameras earned their keep. 2 men in dark clothes, working fast with bolt cutters. The infrared images were crisp enough to read the logo on one man's jacket. The truck they'd parked 50 yards down the road was registered to Lockhart Construction, LLC. I saved the footage to 3 different locations: cloud backup, external drive, phone. Nobody was losing this evidence. But Brenda wasn't done with Tess. She contacted a school board member, someone she knew from the HOA social committee, and claimed that Wade Ellison was threatening to poison the community water supply. The school board member called the principal. The principal called Tess into the office during second period biology. Tess told me about it that evening. She sat at the kitchen table with her science fair projects spread around her: water filtration samples, pH test strips, a poster board half finished with data tables. "They said we're the bad guys, Dad." The principal asked if our family was experiencing difficulties at home. The smell of cut wire still clung to my clothes from that morning's fence repair. The red blink of a trail camera battery indicator pulsed in my memory like a heartbeat. 19 more days, baby girl. And then what? And then everybody finds out who the real bad guys are. Days passed, each one hotter than the last. The monsoon that usually breaks the heat in late July stayed away, teasing us with clouds that built every afternoon and dissolved every evening without dropping a single drop. The desert was holding its breath. So was I. I checked the well monitors every morning, flow steady, pressure holding, cameras showing nothing but jackrabbits and the occasional coyote trotting past the well house at dawn. Tess counted down the days on a calendar she'd taped to the refrigerator. She'd drawn a little water drop on day 30 and colored it blue. Day 25. Craig made his biggest move. He filed formal paperwork with the county for an emergency water district designation, the legal mechanism to seize the Ellison well through eminent domain proceedings. On paper, it looked legitimate. Public health emergency, critical water infrastructure at risk, hundreds of families vulnerable. But Nash Webb had already flagged the filing with ADWR 2 weeks earlier. When Craig's paperwork hit the state office, it landed on the desk of an investigator who'd already been building a file. The investigator pulled Ridgeline Holdings LLC, found the shell company, found the fake maintenance invoices, found the $47,000, found that the man pushing for eminent domain seizure of a private well was the same man who secretly owned the HOA and planned to use that well for his own development project. The county commissioner, a man named Phil Reeves who'd been golfing with Craig for 3 years, received a phone call from the ADWR investigator on a Tuesday afternoon. The call lasted 11 minutes. By Wednesday morning, Commissioner Reeves had withdrawn all support for the emergency water district and issued a public statement about ensuring proper procedural safeguards in water infrastructure decisions. Political speak for, I'm running away from this as fast as my legs will carry me. Craig was alone. His shell company exposed. His county connection severed. His injunction denied. His wife's contamination complaint dismissed. And the clock was still ticking. Day 28. I drove past Copper Ridge on my way to the feed store. Sprinklers were running in the common areas. Kids were playing in the splash pad by the community pool. Water flowing from my well, through my pipes, into their lives. They had no idea what was coming. I didn't feel good about that, but I didn't feel bad about it either. Every drop of that water ran through infrastructure my grandfather built, and the people controlling it had tried to destroy my family. The water would come back. But first, the truth had to come out. Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting for the evening of day 29, the night before the deadline. Copper Ridge Community Center, a beige building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs that smelled like floor polish and sunscreen. 150-plus residents showed up, standing room only. Portable fans hummed in the corners, barely moving the thick air. Brenda stood at the front with a microphone. Hair freshly done, white blouse, full command voice. This man, Wade Ellison, is holding our water hostage. He is threatening our children. He is using his control of an essential resource to bully this entire community into submission. I am asking you to authorize the board to take legal action to protect our families. The room murmured. But the mood wasn't what Brenda expected. The three families who'd bought useless filters sat together in the third row, arms crossed. Earl Compton stood against the back wall with 6 gray-haired neighbors who remembered Henry Ellison's generosity. One of the filter families stood up, a man named Keith Palmer, software engineer, 2 kids. Mrs. Lockhart, you sent an email saying our water was contaminated. The county test showed it was clean. My family spent $500 on a filtration system we didn't need. Did you have the test results when you sent that email? Brenda blinked. The board acted out of an abundance of caution. Did you have the results? The results came after. They came before. I checked with the county. The results were posted 2 days before your email. The room shifted. Earl stepped forward and held up 2 printouts. County water test. Clean. And this is the email Brenda sent telling you to be afraid. She lied. The vote to authorize legal action failed. 112 against, 38 in favor. Brenda's face went tight. She gripped the podium. Fine. When your faucets run dry tomorrow, remember who you sided with. I'd been standing in the back the whole time, near the door, arms folded. I waited until the room got quiet. Then I spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. Tomorrow is day 30. I'm not the one you should be afraid of. I turned and walked out. My shoes squeaked on the linoleum. Behind me, the room erupted into noise. Day 30. July heat makes the dawn feel like opening an oven. 112 degrees forecast. I was at the well house at 5 in the morning. The sky was just going from black to deep purple over the Superstition Mountains to the east. My phone showed all systems nominal. Flow rate steady, pressure holding. I entered the code on the digital lock, opened the well house door, stood in front of the master distribution manifold, the junction where the main lines split into the Copper Ridge feed and the Ellison Ranch feed. 2 valves, 2 directions. I turned the Copper Ridge valve to closed position. Confirmed on my phone. Flow to subdivision, 0. Flow to Ellison Ranch, normal. The well pump hummed behind me. Steady and faithful. 65 years of service and counting. I closed the well house door. Locked it. Stood outside in the pre-dawn darkness and looked east, where the sky was turning from purple to gold. A roadrunner darted across the gravel 20 feet away, stopped, looked at me, and kept going. Life continuing. The desert doesn't care about human drama. It just endures. I planned to do the same. I drove home, made coffee, sat on the porch with Laureen. We didn't talk much. We watched the sun come up. The desert willows caught the first light, and their bark turned amber. Somewhere in Copper Ridge, someone was about to turn on a shower and get nothing. By 7, phones were ringing across Copper Ridge. By 9, a crowd had gathered outside the community center. Brenda was there in her Navigator, honking and pointing and making calls. By 10, an emergency meeting materialized. 250 people packed into that community center. Deputy Griffith stood by the door. A reporter from the Pinal County Independent sat in the second row with a recorder. Brenda had the microphone again. Her voice cracked between fury and fear. "He's a terrorist. This man is a terrorist. Deputy, arrest him. He's cutting off water to children." The door opened. I walked in with Jill Weaver beside me. Jill carried a leather portfolio. I carried nothing but the truth and 30 days of patience. Jill took the microphone. She was calm the way good attorneys are calm, the kind of calm that makes everyone else realize they should stop shouting. "My name is Jill Weaver. I represent Wade Ellison, owner of the Ellison well that supplies water to this community. I'd like to read from the water supply agreement recorded with Pinal County, a contract the HOA agreed to when Copper Ridge was built." She read Clause 14. Every word. The room was silent. Then she opened the portfolio. Photographs of the padlock on Wade's water valve. The police report documenting the cutoff during 108-degree heat. The county test results proving clean water. Brenda's panic email sent after she already knew the water was safe. Trail camera footage of Craig's crew cutting the Ellison fence at 2 a.m. Corporate records showing Ridgeline Holdings LLC, Craig's shell company that secretly owned the HOA management contract. Bank records showing $47,000 in fabricated maintenance invoices paid to Craig's company from homeowner dues. Jill set each document on the table like dealing cards. The room didn't breathe. I stepped to the microphone. 250 faces looked at me. "I didn't cut your water. She did." I pointed at Brenda. 6 weeks ago, she padlocked my water line. In 108 degrees, with my wife and 14-year-old daughter inside our home. She filed a false contamination report. She sent an email she knew was a lie. Her husband trespassed on my property, cut my fences, and let my horses loose on a county road at night. He embezzled $47,000 of your money through fake invoices. And he tried to use an emergency government action to steal my family's well. A well my grandfather drilled in 1961, so he could build more houses and make more money. I paused. The room was so quiet, I could hear the portable fan cycling. I followed the contract, every word of it. 30 days notice, delivered by certified mail. She broke the law. He broke the law. I just read the fine print. Deputy Griffith stepped forward. He walked past me, past Brenda, and stopped in front of Craig Lockhart, who was sitting in the front row trying to look small for a big man. The click of handcuffs closing on Craig's wrists echoed in that silent room like a period at the end of a sentence. Felony water tampering. Fraud. Criminal damage. Brenda was cited on the spot, filing false government reports, HOA financial fraud, conspiracy to interfere with utility service. Craig was let out. Brenda stood frozen at the podium, mouth open, clipboard dangling from one hand. Someone in the back started clapping, then stopped. It wasn't a moment for applause. It was a moment for understanding. I leaned back into the microphone one last time. The water comes back on in 1 hour. It always belonged to this community, but it was never hers to control. I walked out into the sun. The heat hit me like a wall, 112 degrees of Arizona summer pressing down on my shoulders. But it felt different now, cleaner, lighter, like the air itself had been holding its breath and finally let go. Outside, 2 women I didn't recognize stopped me in the parking lot. One of them was crying. "We didn't know," she said. "We didn't know what they were doing to you." I told her it was all right. I told her the water would be back on within the hour. She grabbed my hand with both of hers and squeezed it so hard my knuckles cracked. "Thank you," she said, "and thank your grandfather." I sat in my truck for a minute before driving home. The steering wheel was too hot to touch with bare hands. I wrapped my shirt around my palm and turned the key. The engine hummed to life. I drove the 4 miles back to the ranch with the windows down and the desert air roaring through the cab, hot and dry and honest. The water came back on at 11:47 a.m. I opened the valve from my phone, sitting on my porch with a glass of well water sweating in my hand, Lorene beside me, Tess inside, working on her science fair display. Craig Lockhart was charged with 2 felony counts: water supply tampering and fraud. His attorney tried to negotiate, but the ADWR investigation had already been referred to the state attorney general. The shell company, the fake invoices, the attempted seizure, it was all documented in a way that made plea bargains complicated. Brenda was removed as HOA president by emergency board vote that same week. She faced 3 misdemeanor charges: filing false government reports, HOA financial fraud, and conspiracy to interfere with utility service. The Lockhart house went on the market in September. The independent audit that followed revealed the full scope: $47,000 in embezzled homeowner dues over 3 years. Money that should have fixed the playground where kids scraped their knees on rusted bolts. Money that should have repaired the pool pump that had been making a grinding noise since February. Money that should have replaced the dying landscaping along the main boulevard that Brenda always blamed on insufficient water pressure. That was rich, considering she was the one manipulating the water supply. The new board sent refund checks to every household. Small amounts, 100 here, 200 there, but the principle was larger than the dollar signs. People started showing up to board meetings, started reading the financial reports, started asking questions. That might have been the best thing to come out of all of it. The community voted to establish the Copper Ridge Water Cooperative in October. I retained full ownership of the well, Henry's well, my well, but the cooperative took over distribution management with an elected board, transparent budgets, and quarterly water quality reports posted publicly. Our water supply agreement was updated, not replaced. The terms got better. The trust got rebuilt. In November, I used a portion of the cooperative surplus payments to establish the Henry Ellison STEM Scholarship, $1,500 annually for a Pinal County student pursuing studies in water science, environmental engineering, or related fields. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from Florence, whose family couldn't afford community college tuition. She wants to be a hydrologist. Henry would have liked that. He drilled that well to take care of people. Seemed right that it should keep doing that in a new way. The well gives water. The scholarship gives opportunity. Same source, different pipes. The 3 families who'd bought unnecessary filtration systems got full refunds. 2 from a settlement with Brenda's personal assets, 1 from the cooperative's Goodwill Fund. Keith Palmer, the man who'd stood up at the meeting, joined the new cooperative board. Tess won the Pinal County Science Fair that spring. Her project? Groundwater filtration efficiency in arid aquifer systems. Her display included a photograph of Henry Ellison standing next to the well in 1962, squinting into the Arizona sun, hand on the pump housing, smiling like he'd just struck gold, because he had. The classmate who'd told Tess their water was poison found her after the awards ceremony, apologized, asked if they could be lab partners next year. Tess said yes. Some evenings, Laureen and I sit on the porch as the sun drops behind the mountains. The sky turns orange, then purple, then that deep desert indigo that makes you feel small and grateful at the same time. The well pump hums beneath us, a sound so constant you forget it's there until you listen for it. Duke and Penny stand in the corral, tails flicking. The desert willows my grandmother planted throw long shadows across the yard. "Your grandfather would be proud," Lorraine said one evening. I took a sip of water. Cool, clean, faintly mineral. 65 years from that aquifer and counting. He'd say we just did what the well was built to do. Take care of people. If you've dealt with a nightmare HOA, drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and make sure that bell is on, because next week I've got the story of a corrupt developer who tried to bulldoze a retired building inspector's home. He didn't know what that man had been inspecting for 30 years. You don't want to miss it.
And that's where this one lands, not with a shouting match in the desert. It lands with a quiet man in a community center holding out a contract his grandfather signed, reminding 200 families who actually kept the water flowing. Brenda and Craig Lockhart didn't fall because they picked the wrong target. They fell because they missed their passion for greatness. They thought a black family on 5 acres of inherited lands would fold under pressure, under threats, under lies repeated loudly enough. They were wrong. The lesson isn't about owning a wall. It's about knowing you're right and documenting everything. With saved every letter, every photo, every email, the contract nobody else bothered to read. When the time came, he didn't need to raise his voice. The paperwork spoke for itself. If you've ever had your utility weaponized or your family targeted by someone who thought they owned the neighborhood, tell me in the comment. And he's afraid because next time we've got a retired building inspector who catch a